So hi everybody, I'm working this afternoon at my stand-up desk, which is what my yoga instructor says I'm supposed to do now. So last Friday, about 100 Powerline VIP subscribers tuned into our live webcast, where we spent an hour taking your questions and talking about news of the week. One question that came up was whether we'd fly Powerline 1, our drone, during the webcast, and sadly we weren't able to, though I've remedied that problem here, as you'll see. So anyway, we've put together an 8-minute highlight reel here of some of the things we talked about the other day in our first ever webcast. I hope you'll think about joining Powerline VIP, only $4 a month. And our webcasts are just the beginning of premium content we're going to start rolling out soon, including shortly my first ever weekly briefing that will come out on Monday mornings. So stay tuned to the site for further details, and we'll see you down the road.
Let's get underway, and the first thing we thought we would talk about this evening is really an evergreen topic, and that is handicapping the 2016 Republican field.
Just from talking to passengers on the National Review cruise in the post-election 2014 cruise this past November, I was really struck if there was a consensus Republican candidate, it was Scott Walker. He just has built up a tremendous reservoir of goodwill by a lot of folks around the country who have admired his standing in there under fire, have admired his acquitting himself with great honor under tremendous pressure without wilting.
But now that there are, what, 500 Republicans running for president, I'm still waiting for Harold Stassen to announce, just to complete the field. I'm starting to worry that the nominee, this is not that I'm for him, but I'm starting to worry that Bush is going to end up the nominee anyway. And that's only because in a crowded field, a person with his resources and establishment a network of connections can win a grinded out campaign where he just comes out the best in enough places and has enough resources to get himself over the finish line.
But I like Marco for a lot of reasons. I mean, one is I think he's a winner. I agree with Scott's comment about his political talent. I think we need somebody who can motivate voters to get out there and pull the lever and not just die-hard Republicans, but some of the groups that we don't necessarily dominate. You know, somebody who's got enough charisma, who's got enough personal appeal to reach into more than just the hardcore that'll turn out for, say, Mitt Romney. Well, let me ask this question, Scott. There's an amazing degree of consensus, at least at this group, on who are the top couple of contenders. Who do you like other than those? Who's kind of a dark horse that you like?
Yeah, and I would say, John, this is my personal likes. I think maybe even if I could pluck somebody from the field of the 17 or 20 candidates it's going to be, in my case, I think it would be Rick Perry. I really like him, and he's dealt hands-on with the immigration issue that matters a lot to me, and I think to a lot of people like me, and I also admire the way he has acquitted himself. It's unbelievable that he's still got this indictment hanging over his head, and I don't know how that factors into the equation, but I'm not saying he'd be the strongest, although I think he'd be a very strong candidate.
And Steve, I think next on the agenda is the underreported story of the week. What has been going on here lately that has not been finding its way into the headlines the way that it should?
Well, I think by far the most underreported story of the week has to be Caitlyn Jenner. I mean, I've heard a couple things about this, but frankly, I could use more. I just haven't heard enough about this. It's such a significant benefit and everything else.
Nor have I seen enough pictures. I mean, another of our viewers asks, if you assume that a conservative gets elected president in 2016, how hard is it going to be to roll back the Obama executive state mess? And that's obviously a complicated question, but one thing I would point out is that, and we've seen this with Republican administrations time after time, the president appoints the bureaucracy down, what is it, 2 levels, 3 levels, you know, so you can't quite count on your fingers and toes, but if you had a room full of people, you'd be able to count on your fingers and toes the number of bureaucrats, you know, that the president can actually appoint. But then below them, you have the entire permanent professional bureaucracy that resides in Washington, D.C. and is almost 100% Democrat. And the extent to which you can really turn around these big ships, these vast agencies, by appointing, you know, 6 people at the top is questionable, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they're like, I'll wade in real quick, they're like ocean-going super tankers, these bureaucracies. They're really hard to stop because they have so much momentum, legally and otherwise. I think it's a case-by-case basis. Some things are very hard to reverse once they're set into the Federal Register because they take on some legal precedents that's very hard to unravel without a judge saying you can't do what you're trying to do. This happened to the Reagan administration in some cases I know about. There is one specific area, and this is something I want to write about and make a big stink about, where the next president on day one can reverse some really insidious nonsense that the Obama administration has started. And it's this whole Title IX business at colleges, you know, where they're getting rid of due process rights for, you know, a really young man accused of sexual assault. And, I mean, this is way out of control to the point that even liberals and, 20-some professors at Harvard Law School said this is completely unprincipled and wrong. And here's the thing to know about that. That was not a formal regulation ever that came from the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. It's what we call these days, and there's a lot of this, these guidance letters or informal rulemaking. What the Department of Education did was send a letter, a dear colleague letter, which, you know, that right away you know that there's something insincere going on, saying, you know, you need to set up a review process to process sexual harassment and sexual assault claims on college campuses. And if you don't, this is the way this game works, if you don't, we're going to investigate you and possibly cut off your federal funds. The Office of Civil Rights at DOE has been threatening that for years. They often do investigate, and colleges don't like the bad publicity. They've never cut off anybody's funds. So here's my proposal. On day one, if we get a Republican president, the president should order the Office of Civil Rights and Department of Education to rescind that letter from Obama and send out a new one. And the new one should say, if you do not observe all the formal due process rights for criminals and the way the legal system works, we will investigate you and possibly cut off your federal funds. Do that on day one and put an instant end to this outrage.